Hello and welcome to Fair Falcon Predictions. Today we'll be taking a look at the 2022 general election map for the United States House of Representatives, elections that are coming up quite fast this fall. Now, just a little intro, since this is the first video before we get started. I just want to say that this channel is mostly for my enjoyment, but it will be great if I get a little bit of a following, but we'll see. We're just having fun here primarily. But I kind of just decided to do this because I thought a third way would be nice between Let's Talk Elections and Red Eagle Politics. They each have their own base they're trying to pander to, and they do this professionally, so they tell people what they want to hear versus the reality on the ground more. And I do have agreements and disagreements with them on the political sphere, both, but I do lean a little closer, for full disclosure, to Let's Talk Elections on the politics. But in terms of the prediction accuracy, I will have to hand it that I do think Red Eagle is better, but I still think that maybe there's little void in terms of the quality of content based on their own personal biases. So, without further ado, I'm going to try and take this guess without my personal biases. Obviously, everyone's human, but I'm going to keep that in my mind consciously as we go forth from district to district. So, starting with the state of Alabama, there's nothing. And I colored everything I already thought is safe, and we're just going to go in and color what is not safe afterwards. So we have 168 Democratic safe seats, 201 safe Republican seats, and there are 435 seats, and you need 218 to win. So we're just going to be labeling stuff as safe D or safe R this whole time, because otherwise it gets too complicated and long. Alaska, nothing here, safe R. Arizona, this should be pretty interesting. We have several close seats. Now, in the first seat, I do expect the Republicans to hold on, and by a decent margin despite the corruption scandals. 6 should also flip, and the incumbent is even running again. And 4 will stay Democratic. I'm very sure about that one. So keep in mind, even though I'm ranking these as safe D or safe R, it's not necessarily like this the entire time. Okay, and I'll mention occasionally if it deserves special mention in terms of how we're ranking these seats. In this video, we're just using a regular computer mic. We're keeping it casual. I'm not exactly a great public speaker, so we'll just try and get the basics of this thing done. All right, so LA area. This one I originally would have had at 41 as safe Republican. I still think they'll win it, and it's colored as that on the map. But there was a closer showing than expected, and Calvert's kind of a creep. Young Kim does very well. She will win. Porter and Levin, I've seen nothing to indicate that they will lose. Michelle Steele, I think that one's almost safe R, really. And then 27 up here, Magic Mike, he's going to win the damn thing. I'm almost 100% sure of that one. And if it was under the old boundaries, I might have just left it as safe to begin with. 22, I do think Valadeo's impeachment vote will save him. 13, that's kind of my hot take. I think the Hispanic trends in this sort of seat will narrowly flip it for the GOP, but I do think Harder will hold on in his seat. Moving on to the state of Colorado, I do think Republicans will pick up 8, but it will be by narrower than I expected. It's quite a lean race. And keep in mind, guys, if I'm not directly categorizing something, just default think it's either lean D or R based on which party I give it to. So I do think Johanna will hold on, but I do think it will be closer than Courtney for sure, and I don't have to get into why. Delaware, nothing to see here. Florida, also nothing to see here. DeSantis got his mander through. Georgia, I don't think Sanford Bishop is going to have much of a problem, but it's obviously not safe Democratic. Hawaii, they just had their primaries a few hours ago. Somewhat interesting, but nothing too surprising, but there's nothing competitive there. Idaho, nothing to see here. Illinois, I do think that Miss Sherry retiring will cost Democrats the seat, as well as them being too greedy with the redistricting process. I do think, however, they will manage to narrowly hold on to this 13 seat, and this Lauren Underwood seat is likely D, bordering on safe. I don't see why she would lose. Moving on to the state of Indiana, a lot of people have the first district closer than I would expect, and I can see the argument for that, and I do think it will flip within this decade, but I guess I'm a little bullish on it for the Democrats, so I do think Mervyn will win at the end of the day by about 5 points or so. Iowa, I don't think Zach Nunn is going to have a problem flipping this seat at all. It's a Trump seat, Kansas, things gave me pause, and it's definitely closer than before, but I would rate this as a tilt R, basically, for whoever's running against Davids. They redrew the lines, otherwise it would have been a slam dunk. Kentucky, nothing to see here. Louisiana, same story. Maine, I do think Poliquin will win, but it's only because of the national environment, like tilt Republican. Maryland, I do not think that Neil Parrott will win. I do think David Trone will win. This is one of those exact kind of seats with trends and the decision on Roe versus Wade regarding abortion, where you would expect Democrats to really overperform compared to June or so. So I'm quite confident now that David Trone will win re-election despite this seat getting substantially redder in redistricting. And before it would have been a slam dunk. Massachusetts, nothing to see here. Michigan, very interesting. I am going to have to diverge with Red Eagle here. I am quite confident that Hillary Schulten will defeat John Gibbs, and I do think that Peter Meyer would have held on if he had won the primary for the general election. I do think John James is not going to have trouble winning here. Third time's the lucky charm. 8, maybe I'm a bit of a sucker for Kildee, and I could be wrong, of course, but I do think Kildee will manage to hold on against Paul Young, the carpetbagger. And I don't think the candidate is good enough to flip it for the GOP this year, but it's going to be very close, and I could be wrong. 7 is just too purple for me to see Slotkin win this year. If it was 2020, she would win. Minnesota, I wouldn't have had one out of the safe R column before the special election, but Republicans will still win it, and we do see this phenomenon quite common that whoever wins the special election almost always tends to do better in the fall election. We saw that with Troy Balderson, where he won by a fraction of a point around this time, almost exactly to the day, maybe a few days before, 4 years ago in the Northern Columbus special election. And then he won by 8 or 9 points in the fall and absolutely destroyed the Democrat under the same lines in 2020. So I do not think they're going to have a problem here with Brad Finstad. The entire party, for the most part, got behind him in the second regular primary, and I think it's really likely R. At the same token, I really am quite confident that Angie Craig, as she goes by, will win re-election, but if she doesn't, you can blame the weed parties. Same goes for Tim Walz, but that's for another video. Mississippi, nothing to discuss here. Missouri, nothing to discuss here. Democrats got quite lucky keeping the Emanuel Cleaver seat. Montana, the only reason I didn't color it is because the party is quite strong here, but we could see this weighing quite a bit. So this is definitely quite likely R, and the Republicans shouldn't have trouble winning that, but I just wanted to briefly address that. Plus, I just find it interesting they finally have 2 seats. Nebraska, Don Bacon is not going to have trouble winning. If he got primaried out by a nut, he would definitely be in a position like Meyer where he'd be winning the general, but thanks to the nutty primary challenger, the Democrats would flip the seat, but luckily for the Republicans, that's not the case. And now we're already at a House majority for the Republicans, 218 to Democrats 183. So by this point, it's just redundancy going on, but we will. Nevada is probably the state I'm the least confident in. We're just going to throw our marbles around here. I do think that this 3 seat will flip, but I think these 2 will hold. I would not be surprised if another seat like 4 also flips into the Republican column. I would be surprised if Democrats kept all 3 of these, and I also would be surprised if all 3 of these competitive seats went Republican, but that will remain to be seen, so let's split the difference. New Hampshire, Custer's going to win. I don't think she's going to have too much trouble. I do think Pappas will lose, however, and that should be quite interesting, but it wouldn't surprise me if either race went either way. But New Jersey, I don't see why Tom Kaine Jr. would have any trouble winning in this kind of environment. New Mexico, yeah, Harrell is going to win, and these 2 seats will also remain Democratic as well. New York, maybe it's kind of a hot topic, and I definitely could change my mind after the special election in a few days, but I think Republicans will flip that one. It was very stupid to pick Antonio Delgado for the position of lieutenant governor. Quite wild, if you ask me. 22, I do think Republicans will narrowly hold on, but I'm not super confident about that. I think they will flip 18 as an open seat. Oops. And I do think, though, that Maloney's quite strong and will hold on in 17. And I would have had this colored as probably safe Democratic if Swozy didn't do his sacrificial lamb bid, but he did. But I still think Democrats will manage to hold on here. Hopefully, for their sake, they nominate another corporate type Democrat in the vein of Swozy or Gottheimer. If they go a little more left, we could definitely see that move. North Carolina, I do think Bo Hines is a terrible candidate, but I do think the environment will pull him over. But trends could definitely screw him in the future years. And if Trump or DeSantis is president in the next election, I do think under similar lines in 2026, unless the court throws out this map again, I do think Hines would lose then. But for now, he should be a congressman. I do think Butterfield will win, although it's basically a similar story in reverse, or in inverse, pardon me, with this 13 seat here. So North Dakota, nothing to talk about here. Ohio, I think all of these are going to go Republican. 9 and 13, I'm quite confident in. 1, I could definitely be wrong in. I would paint it as Tilt-R. Steve Chabot seems like he used to outrun the Republican top line quite a bit, but he's really collapsed down and fallen victim to increasing partisanship. So Oklahoma, they cut up the former Horn seat, and that's not going to be competitive. Oregon, I do think all of these will go Democratic, but the least likely one to go Democratic is 5, but I'm quite confident 4 and 6 will go Democratic. Now, we're moving on to the state of Pennsylvania. If Lamb ran again, I think he would win this 17 seat, especially since it went from Biden plus 2-ish to Biden plus 6-ish. Sorry, that's hard to say under the new lines. But since he decided to throw away his seat, I'm going to have to flip it as a lean Republican seat. Wild. This area is actually ancestrally Republican, and it was represented by people such as Charlie Dent, who've now become critics of the party, and I do think she will lose to Lisa Scheller, who's running again, and I do think this will be the year that Cartwright goes down. In terms of Rhode Island, this is probably the most competitive it's going to be in a while. I do think that it will stay Democratic, but if James Langevin had run again, I would have felt much more confident, and I would not be surprised if Alan Fung at all won. And frankly, that's probably one of the races in terms of the House where the GOP has done the best in terms of nominating, and the Democrats would probably be wise to nominate Seth Magaziner, but we will see. South Carolina, nothing to see here. South Dakota, definitely nothing to see here. Tennessee, nothing to see here. Texas, the fajita strips live on. That's pretty based, right? Okay, 28. I do think Cuellar will win, but I wouldn't be surprised if he loses, and it would be due to corruption scandals along with Hispanic trends. 15 will definitely flip. 34, I do think will stay in the Democratic column, but it's almost inevitable that it will flip under these same type of lines, hypothetically speaking, down later in the decade. But for now, the Biden plus 16-ish should be too much for Mayra Flores to overcome, and Vicente Gonzalez should return to Congress again. And this is something most of the community agrees with as well. Utah, nothing to talk about here. They basically pulled in Oklahoma City and chopped up the former Ben McAdams seat. Vermont, nothing to see here. Virginia, this one's going to be quite exciting. I do think that Elaine Luria will go down. I left this not safe blue, Virginia 10, because the Republicans did a very good job nominating, but I would still put it as likely B. Hung Kao is not going to win. I'm sorry, guys. Virginia 7. I do think this is kind of like a Maryland 10 type situation. I had it as Republican before the Roe decision, but at this point, I am going to say that Spanberger does hold on, especially since Yesli Vega is quite radical on the issue for something that came out 3 weeks ago. 3, I just wanted to mention, but it's safe Republican. I don't think Kent is going to have any trouble, but people don't agree with me, but I don't think he will. Kind of a hot take. I think the Republicans will flip Washington 8, though. Lean Republican margin. West Virginia, nothing to see here. Wisconsin, this is likely Republican. I had it at lean before. It would be lean still if, what was his name again? I kind of forgot. He wasn't too relevant. One of the congressmen who's been there the longest, but is quite irrelevant. Ron Kind, if he ran again. But yeah, Derek Van Orden, he ran last time. He was a shoe-in for the nomination this time. I don't even know how to pronounce the Democratic nominee's name, Brad Pfaff or something like that. He did terribly in the primary, and so we're going to have to really consider a margin. That may even be approaching 10 points for Van Orden here. Wyoming, nothing here in terms of the general election, but we're having the primary actually in just a few dozen hours, and Liz Cheney is cooked. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll have more content for you on the governor and senator front soon. But for now, that's all I got for you. Have a great day, and we'll talk later.